Welcome back to episode 10, the final episode of this series. I honestly can't believe that I've made it this far and made all these recipes. So this week I am making Prue's Walnut Whirls from the final episode of the 2020 series of Bake Off. Here we go. The first step was to make the walnut cookies. This part went pretty well. They're super cute cookies and they were really tasty. After that, I made the coffee-infused ganache, and I've never infused anything before, so this process was really interesting to me. Basically what you do is you heat heavy cream on the stove, and you put whole coffee beans in, and you let it get just before boiling point, and then you leave it to infuse for, I think it was about 10 minutes. Then you strain the coffee beans out, so you just have the heated cream that's been infused, and you pour that over chopped chocolate. You let it sit for a little bit and then give it a stir, and by that point the chocolate should have melted and it should blend pretty smoothly. So the next step was to take the cooled cookies. At this point I've learned to make sure things are fully cooled before you add any sort of topping to them. So the next step was to pipe little kisses of coffee ganache onto each cookie. The cookies were looking great at this point. The next step called for homemade marshmallow. This is where I went off recipe and things started to get a little bit weird. So pretty much all recipes for anything marshmallow call for beef gelatin. I don't eat beef, and I was just a little uncomfortable with using beef gelatin in this. I even went so far as to buy the beef gelatin sheets that this recipe called for, and I did look into some vegetarian alternatives. There's something called agar powder, which has been reviewed as a pretty good alternative, but this recipe specifically called for gelatin sheets, and I don't think you can substitute powder with that. I'm not sure. It seemed complicated in this recipe, and I wasn't really up for trying. So I kind of cheated and bought some marshmallow fluff, which to me seemed like a pretty good substitute for marshmallow filling. I got the marshmallow fluff and was pleasantly surprised to discover that this is manufactured in Lynn, Massachusetts, just up the road from here. If anybody from the Fluff Factory is watching this, I would love a tour. It seems like an awesome place to just see how fluff is made. Would love that. And the other great thing about marshmallow fluff is that there's no gelatin in it. The only ingredients are corn syrup, sugar, egg white, and vanilla. So that was great news. I put it in a piping bag. I probably should have chilled it. The recipe did say to chill the marshmallow mixture, but I figured that was just because it had come off the stove. So I didn't chill it. I piped it on, and here's what happened. The fluff didn't really hold its shape on the cookies. I don't know why. Maybe you need gelatin for that. Maybe I should have chilled it. I was determined to salvage this, so I immediately put the cookie sheet with the marshmallow blobs into the freezer to see if they could at least hold their blob shape. While they were in there, I tempered chocolate, which was supposed to be the coating. The chocolate was tempering really well, looking really nice and super shiny. But then once it was done heating, you were supposed to let it cool to a certain temperature, which I did, but then I had to fiddle a bit with the camera, make sure I was ready to film again, and I think I waited too long because by the time I poured it onto the marshmallow, it was just too thick. It was not going to form a thin coating like it's supposed to. So I made a game time decision to just splatter paint chocolate onto these marshmallow blobs, and it actually looks pretty cool. Kind of went for like a Jackson Pollock effect. I then refrigerated these, and it was time for the taste test. These were delicious. The walnut cookie on the bottom turned out nice and crumbly. It was perfect balance with the fluff and the coffee ganache and the little bits of chocolate on top. This recipe was just so good. Probably one of my favorite tasting recipes of the whole batch of 10. I was really happy with how they turned out, even though it wasn't quite like it was supposed to look. What I've learned with a lot of these is you just got to be patient, and if things aren't going well, don't be afraid to improvise, go off recipe, and just make it work. Even if it doesn't look appealing, usually these things still end up tasting good. So I guess I've made all 10 recipes. I really can't believe it. When I set out to do this, I didn't really know what I was getting myself into. I didn't know anything about filming or editing videos or a lot of different baking concepts. So I've learned a ton. The coolest thing about this is that I've learned so many new baking skills. And a lot of these recipes, I've taken components of them and used them to bake other things just based on ideas that these recipes have inspired. So that's probably been my favorite part of this whole thing. It was kind of like going to mini pastry school, but for free. Okay, well, not for free because I had to buy a lot of different bizarre supplies and ingredients. I'm so happy I finished all 10 recipes. I'm not sure what I'm gonna film next. I might do a recap video talking about some of the highlights, my favorite recipes, my least favorite recipes, definitely the eclairs, the tastiest recipes. Would love to hear what you wanna see, what baking videos you think I should film next. In the meantime, you can follow me on Instagram. I'm doing a lot of baking on there, and I will see you next time.